Marty is able to maintain his head in midline for long periods now. Midline and symmetry of the head, eyes, arms, and legs is the hallmark of the supine position in 4-month-olds. He demonstrates interest in exploring objects with his hands. Marty is very visual in both horizontal and vertical planes, which leads and drives his movement. There's movement in the forearm, wrist, and individual fingers as he remains visually engaged with the object. His legs bang down on the surface, typical at this age. Extremity movement disassociated from trunk movement is more evident with frequent anti-gravity extremity movement. Babies at this age often can't combine the movements of hands and feet, nor are they always able to coordinate their reach with their vision. When the feet are moving, the hands may be still, and vice versa. By 5 months, we should see Marty consistently moving both hands and feet together, and better able to combine reaching movement with his ability to localize and track an object. Owen still shows much more asymmetry of both the head and extremities than is expected at 4 months. Owen's head is turned to the side, and he shows more activity on the left side of his trunk. Rather than being in a straight line, his body is curved like the letter C. He relies on extension rather than a balance of extension and flexion. The movement associated with repositioning disturbs and disorganizes Owen. It takes him longer to reorganize, though he calms down when reassured. He exhibits random movements in his arms and legs. However, there's not much anti-gravity movement. He appears to be attending to the toy and is moving both arms on the surface but not lifting his shoulder off the surface as expected. When facilitated into a side-lying position, Marty follows along with his upper arm and disassociated lower extremities and is able to sustain the posture, indicating a solid balance of trunk flexor and extensor muscles. He is able to lift his head and upper trunk off the support surface, which is a precursor to being able to roll independently onto his tummy. Babies who can't lift their head and upper trunk usually have trouble rolling, or use a less optimal rolling strategy of excessive neck and trunk extension. Owen does not have the same ability to sustain the side-lying posture as Marty. The top arm is sluggish in its ability to be used to assist in the rolling maneuver. Owen does not lift his head off the support surface to begin head righting, though we would expect a 4-month-old developing typically to demonstrate this response. Owen demonstrates inadequate control in side-lying and in rolling onto the back. Marty is able to get his shoulders and upper arms forward. With his head lifted to 90 degrees, we see extensor muscle activity down into the lumbar spine. His lower extremities still show some flexion and abduction, but he is moving toward exhibiting lower extremity extension. He is beginning to take weight on fisted hands, typical for this age. He is able to turn his head freely and follow a toy side to side. As he turns his head and starts pushing, we can see that this push causes a weight shift to the right side. This will help further extend his leg and let him start the initial movement to rolling onto his back. Notice that the elbows are in front of the shoulders, creating a narrower base of support. Marty is also able to reach forward on the surface for a toy. The ability to bring the arms forward and prone is important because it helps facilitate rolling onto the back. Much as we saw at 2 months, Owen's hips are too flexed, which causes weight to be shifted forward to his shoulders and head. His elbows also remain behind his shoulders. These movement patterns interfere with forearm propping. Owen can lift his head clear of the surface just enough to turn it from one side to the other. He cannot sustain head lifting, however, and he uses only neck extension to turn, Owen is unable to use upper extremity control to shift weight posteriorly onto stable lower extremities, which would provide greater stability for his head and support upper extremity weight bearing. Marty starts out with his head in midline. He shows that he's able to lift his legs and activate his trunk muscles. As he moves towards sitting, we see his head in line with his body from 15 to 30 degrees from upright. There is no delay, no head lag. He has good chin tuck of at least 45 degrees. Throughout the maneuver, he is able to help a little by pulling with his arms. By the end of the movement, he is pulling himself forward with his abdominals, and he doesn't have full activation of the lumbar spine. Owen demonstrates head lag throughout the entire maneuver. Owen does not assist in the pull to sit by pulling with his arms. In fact, there is little to no upper extremity participation throughout the maneuver. He does not appear to anticipate the movement toward the upright position. In supported sitting, we see that Marty is moving into the anterior-posterior planes as he reaches for toys and then sits back up. He's able to pick up this small toy and bring it to his mouth. We see good head control and chin tuck, with head in midline. Babies of this age often reach with one hand, using the other upper extremity for stability until full postural control is developed. His body is supported only at the hips and pelvis. We see extension down to the mid-thoracic spine. Full extension down to the lumbar spine will not be present until 6 months. Even with minimal support at one shoulder, Marty is able to turn his head quickly and easily to localize and grossly follow the toy in all directions without losing his balance. In supported sitting, Owen exhibits a momentary burst of head lifting in midline, but he is unable to maintain that head position for even the briefest period of time. He is unable to turn his head or look side to side, even when the examiner provides support at the upper arm and shoulder. The examiner holds him high under the armpits for maximum assistance. Owen has difficulty activating his vision in this position, unlike Marty, who is able to visually fixate on and begin to track a toy. The extremity movement that Owen demonstrates is used to compensate for his decreased strength, control, and stability in the head and trunk. In horizontal suspension, Marty is able to keep his neck and trunk extended as he is tipped forward. He maintains his head upright to 45 degrees above horizontal, holding it steady in midline through the whole maneuver. He shows good trunk extension with scapular adduction, but he is able to freely move his arms and legs in this position. He has trunk extension into the lumbar spine. Owen is able to hold his head up briefly during horizontal suspension, but unable to maintain it in midline. Owen does not demonstrate sustained thoracic trunk extension in this position, and he is unable to extend his hips, indicating poor core strength and stability. Unlike Marty, Owen is unable to sustain the neck and trunk extension when moving his arms and legs. Marty has good extension through the neck, trunk, and hips, and he is able to maintain that extension during quick forward tilting in space. However, because he is using his arms to help him sustain trunk extension, he cannot bring them forward into a full protective response, which should be present by 6 months. Within the next 2 months, he will be able to sustain head and trunk extension throughout the forward tilt without the assistance of his arms, resulting in the full upper extremity protective response by the end of the maneuver. Although a mature protective response is not fully developed until 6 months, even at 4 months, Owen is unable to sustain strong neck, trunk, and hip extension during forward tilting. However, There is adequate neck extension to prevent his head from coming in contact with the surface. To sustain neck and trunk extension, he either uses excessive asymmetry or flexes his arms into his chest to increase the tone in his trunk. When Marty is placed in supported standing, his hips are just behind his shoulders, which puts his ankle into relative plantar flexion. He demonstrates extension in his trunk through the lower thoracic and lumbar spine, but cannot yet achieve full hip extension. By 6 months, Marty's hips should be fully extended, creating a vertical line from his shoulders through his hips, knees, and ankles. Marty can sustain this posture with the examiner holding his lower trunk. He doesn't require assistance to support his weight, but rather to maintain his balance. Marty can maintain his head in midline for an extended period of time or move it freely. Owen is readily able to take weight on his lower extremities, but intermittently flexes at the hip and knees. Owen's shoulders are still well in front of his hips. By 4 months, active trunk extension toward a more upright alignment is expected. Unlike Marty, who is able to sustain standing with support at his lower trunk, the examiner must hold Owen in the upper thoracic area to assist him in maintaining the standing position. Head lifting is achieved using neck extension, but this extension is intermittent. Owen lacks adequate hip and trunk control for sustained supported standing.